fusion, which maybe is a good segue to the topic of this space. This idea of multi collaboration. I mean, here we have a CEO of one Web3 company using an app that's built on another Web3 applications. And I was in this discussion the other day with an Algorand community, and this whole vision of multi-chain collaboration, I believe, is necessary. And we have Dfinity with their whole chain fusion application. So they have native Ethereum and native Bitcoin running right now, which is amazing. You have Constellation collaborating with multiple ecosystems. They're part of DREC, and in DREC you have Algorand, Hedera, XRP, and several other people. Yeah, and Ripple. And so, I think that is really what's going to drive home and enter in this mass adoption, right? So you're going to take the best of both worlds. We need to get rid of this, siloed sort of tribalistic attitude where, one chain is going to just rule and dominate everything, because that's not really where you get strength from. You get strength in numbers. You get strength from this sort of chain fusion, right? Where you have multiple aspects of other ecosystems where you can benefit from one another.
Yeah, well said. I mean, I find it ironic that we're an industry based on network effects, and probably one of the things we're best known for as an industry is siloing ourselves and having tribalism and basically fragmenting all of the benefit that you would get from our technology. I also laugh, like, you never see somebody be like, oh, I'm an AWS maxi, or like, I'm a SQL maxi. Like, I will not use a web app that connects to an Oracle database because that is against my philosophy. And yet that's what we do in Web3, right? Is well, no, this is the one blockchain, and I will only use an app that fits my blockchain. So anyways, I think like, especially when you think about the fact that blockchains do different things, like think about what Constellation Network is trying to accomplish, especially on the data side of things. And it's a very unique value proposition. And it's a part of a it's a tool belt for a developer that's can now really, we should be in the mindset of like being able to use multiple tools to build products that can't be built today, or products that couldn't be built 3 years ago or 5 years ago. And so I'm really excited that maybe our industry is starting to move in that direction. So we'll see how it goes.
No, I can, and it's fun to be on this call with Kyle, because I mean, we talk every quarter or something like that. We kind of sync up, and Constellation launched our first hackathon about a month ago, where I leaned into Kyle and the team at ICP. They were the first people I asked, because I've been close with them for a while. And it was a little too last minute to bring you guys in to that hackathon, but everybody was very open. It was really just more about scheduling and planning and time and resources. But I think a lot of those themes are going to start to come out in meaningful ways, right? Algorand came on board to our hackathon as well, and we want to foster different solutions with different ecosystems. That the tribalism doesn't, and I don't think that, Kyle's point is like, the tribalism occurs in the communities, but it doesn't occur in the entity level, right? Like, we're very open conversation. Hey, here's what we're working, here's what's sticking. And when you should always be cautious of a company in general that thinks they can do everything. Sometimes you get like companies that are over engineering heavy in their identity, and those engineers think, well, we don't really need that partner to do that. And I'm guessing Kyle is very similar in this thinking, is that like, that's a fool's errand to just think that you can do everything. Because when you do actually open up with other ecosystems or partners in building a business, you tap into new revenue lines, you tap into new knowledge bases that they're thinking about something totally different than than what we're thinking about. And we take an approach on certain things. And I think we've had some really powerful conversations in the past, just one-on-one, highlighting this. Some of the funny things, I don't know if I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but I've actually thought of how do you engineer the tribalism within your own community, not with other communities, which would then, in my theory, would create kind of this collaboration between other ecosystems. Like if I'm a developer in Constellation's ecosystem or in Definity's, like how could I bring those tools over to the other to get a competitive advantage against some of the other engineers? So it's not about the tribalism between the other ecosystems, but it's actually like creating some sort of healthy competition within your own development ecosystem that you're harnessing.
That's such a good point, Ben, in terms of when the way with how Web3 tech stacks work. Let's say you have probably DeFi is the easiest example. Like you have an AMM app. Your competition is like, let's say if you're built on an Ethereum L2, your competition is not with a Solana DeFi app. You're not competing with them. You're only competing with the ones who are built on your L2, which really kind of is not a free market in the sense of like if you think about competition drives innovation, competition drives better products. Well, by fragmenting all of those things, it's be extremely healthy for our industry to have competition across, if you're competition at the app level across the entire space. So that's such a good point.
Well said. Well said.
Yeah, the other thing that I think that's pretty interesting too, and I got this idea from listening to your space that you had with Algorand, is this. So everybody's got a wallet, right? And you want to join your ecosystem, but how is that beneficial to the user if the whole goal is to have mass adoption? I mean, how does it make sense to have a wallet for like 10 different ecosystems? Like that doesn't really onboard people really easily. So maybe there's an avenue there for a multi-chain collaboration, like to come up with a wallet standard, because I'm not aware that there's any universal wallet app that works like a digital passport, right? Like a Web3 passport where you can use, it doesn't matter what ecosystem, it's like a chain agnostic wallet.
Yeah, I think you make a great point. Like today, interesting enough, this is actually really fun, is that the DREC Alliance quarterly meeting was this morning. And why I personally like this initiative is because you're actually putting pen to paper with a multi-chain effort that's tackling one small problem. That's a problem, but instead of trying to boil the ocean with like, oh, this is how this partner is going to solve world peace, it's like, oh, how do we solve this problem around password recovery and create a standard that we all agree to and we all start building together, right? Constellation putting in resources to add to their repo, answer tickets. And it's one small problem that needs to be addressed for adoption purposes, right? If we don't have some sort of standard on password recovery, how are we expected to bring in enterprise partners, serious businesses, more retail to come back? And I think something like that, which John Woods and the Hedera team are driving this, is bringing this multi-chain approach to one little problem that will lead to more standards that we uniformly work with. I think, Dagnum, to your point, right? Like a wallet is an interesting thing because it's the core of what blockchain and crypto is used for, right? Digital assets. And yet it doesn't really serve as a financial business to many of the ecosystems. I know Algorand would agree to that. Kyle's nodding his head, but it's a necessary thing that we have to kind of keep in our ecosystem to allow it to flourish. So I do think it's kind of an interesting thing that's like, well, why do we need to have competition for a wallet, right? Like if it's not really serving as a financial revenue driver, then it's more of a tool to enable the ecosystems, right? So I think you're totally right on that thinking.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, and you guys aren't a stranger to having this multi-chain, multi-collaborative approach. I don't think that it's so. I talk an awful lot online about federal stuff and enterprise adoption, and I've posted a lot about Iron Spider, your application, the Constellation built for the federal government. But I don't think a lot of people are aware that that application itself is a multi-chain collaborative effort. I mean, you could have probably just done it yourself, but you guys chose not to.
Right. So that was actually one of the core principles in us being able to secure that deal was that they didn't want to be locked into one specific vendor. The federal government got into a lot of trouble of that over the past 20 years with certain partners that they couldn't get out. And then it became a whole thing when they got out of that relationship or something didn't work. So when we went into designing Iron Spider for secure communications and certain permissions and access to information, that was the stipulation that we had to be agnostic to any blockchain ecosystem, smart contract solution, you name it. And so that kind of prevented that whole issue that they're locked into one vendor that plagues the federal government. You can imagine they get locked in and then that partner decides to raise the rates 3,000%. And how do they get out of that, right? Or something doesn't really work to their needs. So yes, it is by the core foundation, it is a multi-chain approach. And our thinking there is not Iron Spider is one application, but the idea is not just to be an application; it's to enhance workflows. And I think that this thesis was why John Woods and Lehman brought us into DREC, was that Constellation has a different approach. We believe that blockchain should be a part of different workflows across different agencies, and they should be able to use this technology for various applications, but really working through the workflow. How does a team work with DLT technology? What applications are they working on, or smart contracting language within their team? And can we create this like mosaic or thread that can support all these different workflows? I don't know if that makes sense. It's still Monday morning over here. So gotta get on my blockchain hat after a weekend.
Yeah, and then in doing that, you actually are even further decentralizing everything, right? I see Conduit down there. It just joined the space. I don't know if you guys wanted to add anything to that, because your guys' approach to this is also chain agnostic.
Yeah, it's nice to meet all you guys, by the way. Dagnum, thanks for inviting us. I mean, first of all, we agree with everything that's being said, and I'm not surprised that more minds are thinking this way, because I think, I look at some early individuals in this space that were probably far ahead of their time, like a Cosmos, where it was a internet of blockchains, right? There was full interoperability, and you could look at their implementation and speak different things, but the notion, the vision of like, that's what's going to take place here, it must come to fruition. For us specifically, it all starts at hardware. Our whole point is like, look, everything must run on servers somewhere. So you got to start there. And then what we originally went with, we have a team, we get kind of laughed at sometimes. We have a lot of gray hairs on our team. I'm like by far the youngest. But my point is like, hey, if you're going to go rebuild the internet, shouldn't you start with the people that originally built it? That originally understood where all the bodies are buried and the things that went wrong and how we got to here in this current state, right? And so we have a bunch of those individuals, but it really came back to an interesting notion for us, which I think we're all talking about, which is, the internet and the original protocol that came out of DARPA was never built with things like security, settlement, identity, authority, and privacy. Things were built later on top. and they were built in fragmentations, right? Like you had different people building different components, and now you have a completely fragmented, I mean, if we just go internet, which causes all kinds of different security issues when you don't have common standards there. So I think the ultimate goal here is if you can start to build common standards with core principles like that, then it doesn't really matter what people are doing up above it, right? Like you can take the liberty to have creative design up above it if you can get core principles and standardization across a common framework at the lowest level, which is, it all starts with hardware. And, we're a big proponent of this, saying that real true security starts with hardware. It's not a software issue. It must start there. The original decentralized, Ben, I'm sure you know this as close as you are to, federal and whatnot, but the original decentralized network was not Web3. It's the US military. They've been decentralized for 30 years and very, very good at it because they understand one thing. It first and foremost starts with hardware. So anyways, I love this conversation. Nice to meet all you guys, but that's kind of a little bit Dagnum and where we're coming from, is if we can get some of that built into secure hardware components and start with security there in common structure of building blocks at that level, and then allow, like, say, the blockchains, the DLTs, everything else to run and do their thing, which is a whole nother level, and they're very good at it, right? But if you can get common threads on hardware, can you create interoperability at that level? That's part of the question that we're proposing here. And can you get higher security in that interoperability if you're running it at a hardware level? I don't know. Is that what you were looking for, Dagnum, or did I just drop a bomb in the middle? No. Everyone's like, "What are you talking about, Brandon?"
No, that's perfect. And I don't know if Ben wanted to jump in because that's something that they've actually showed with their DPIN device with the Door technologies, right? So it's integrating on a hardware level and adding that additional security layer to whatever it is.
I love what you're saying. I mean, look, the cool thing about hardware is it's tangible, right? We talk about all this Web3 stuff and these bridges and doing this, but like you can't actually like touch it. And when you can touch something in the Web3 world, it actually like grounds it and makes it more real. No, you're really right. I think even ICP went their approach in making sure their node network was extremely secure from a server perspective. I'm not the expert on that, but I really like their approach. And so, yeah, hardware to me is like, I love hardware. We have a whole hardware team over here, and they think differently. You guys all think very different than software. So, yeah.
And it's Ben, I have to say this too. It's something that honestly, in a lot of ways, starting about 20 years ago with the invention of the mythical cloud that also doesn't exist. It all runs on server somewhere. But then I think that the importance in the market side of hardware started to lose its luster. That there are a lot of people, really talented minds, that got in a habit of starting their education and understanding above the hardware.
Yeah,
this was provided, right? And so it just became this like thing that we forgot over here. And as we then again looked at Web3, we're like, there's a massive amount of Web3 that isn't even close to decentralized. Because you have a Web3 still running on centralized cloud providers. Like, guys, we're not there, right? If I know the tenants, we believe in the tenants, but how do we start to get this actually fulfilled? And it's got to start there. But it's interesting because no one really wants to do hardware. Is also hard. It's a pain. Yeah. For all the cool things about it, it's also a pain. And no one really wants to go there and figure it out and then figure out how to get it distributed. And how do you do that in a way that makes sense monetarily, because it's an investment, right? So why are people going to do it? We went to the cloud to begin with because it was convenient, and humans are very much, what's the path of least resistance, right?
Yeah, I mean, hardware, like you said, it is tough and it's expensive to build and scale, right? So I get why everybody shifted to a software mindset. When we think about new products, especially on the hardware side, we ultimately have to think of how do we support and maintain this for 5 to 10 plus years, right? This isn't like you can do a rapid deployment, test it out, and if it doesn't work, you can kill it on the software side. So you have to like strategically think about how this is going to fund and maintain itself. And then how does it, if it doesn't scale, now you're supporting a small subgroup of devices or some hardware. So yeah, those are a lot of design decisions that we make all the time. It's like, when do we want to put money into it? When is is it around the growth of our community for us to put more into hardware? So, I mean, I love you for making that happen, man. I mean, you definitely got a glutton for punishment and going after hardware, but it's cool stuff when it works. And it's just, you got to think through years. You got to see something 5 years out, right? How do you maintain these things? Like, if I looked at our bills for what we maintain at this company, it's like, ugh, you know. But yeah.
It is. This is like one of the first times I feel like I've been part of a hardware conversation, other than just no decentralization, this has been phenomenal. And it's actually got me thinking, like, I have never really thought about the fact that hardware doesn't scale. And we were in this kind of mentality of like, you want to do things at scale, right? Like, you want to take your business from 0 to 10 million without having to have the headaches of 5 years of understanding manufacturing processes and local regulations and that kind of stuff. And so I don't know, this is kind of opening my eyes of like, oh yeah, actually the hardware is often overlooked and commoditized.
In my 30,000 foot view of the hardware side, it's like one of those things I just want to like, I let that team deal with it. But there's a lot, like when we took, this is kind of a little information, when we took over the door division, the physical hardware sensor, the factory burned down. And so that, and then they never came out of COVID. They didn't really want to fix things. So you're talking about having to relocate to another plant. Then you've got to get people up to speed on what they're doing. Then you have to do QA on those devices. And are they the right plant to manufacture them? It's stuff that we deal with every day, right? It's a frustrating process, and it's like, as cool as hardware sounds, it's a very tough thing to manage, right? And if you look at like Helium, and remember when they kind of came out and said, hey, we're not going to be like the central manufacturer of our network, we're going to open source it and let other people build it. Like, kind of brilliant when you think about it, because they're not going to be responsible for all the overhead of the manufacturing process, and can deploy that in more localized perspectives. So I that was kind of a fascinating thing that came out of like, okay, what's the value of decentralization? Well, there's, when you look at manufacturing processes, that was like a really interesting, innovative idea. Now the problem, there's downsides to that too. And we don't have to make this whole conversation about hardware, by the way, because this could actually like bore a lot of people. But it is fascinating to learn the different mechanisms in business when you talk about that stuff, because then the downside of you don't have a good purview over quality assurance on the product, right? So if one factory is doing it really well, they're probably not sharing it with another factory over there. So how do you kind of orchestrate all of that in a decentralized concept? I know Helium's had some struggles for sure, but that, once again, it's kind of my point to all this is like using what is the value of decentralization? Does it apply here? Yeah, I think that was a pretty innovative approach towards manufacturing.
So at the risk of this becoming what you just said, Ben, no, it's okay. Just like you're bringing up some really good points. You need to have both the hardware and the network both be vertical and horizontally scaling. And that is an incredibly hard thing to do. Quality assurance is a big thing. So how do you start to use things like composable proofs combined with Merkle tree and ZKs to guarantee and ensure the manufacturing process, right? And that standards are adhered to? How do you turn around and have external OSs that are checking what was built was in fact what's running and what's only meant to run? And if that changes, so any malware, spyware, firmware, anything that it gets put on there, it takes the node and the hardware off. And then how do you have different form factors of, call it trust, right? Because the reality is that we don't need the same security and trust. Trust and security, security causes friction. The reason we go around it is because to have something ultimately completely secure is going to cause a whole bunch of friction. And so the market goes like, well, what's the risk profile? And is it worth taking the steps to secure this at this level? Like a public facing website does not need the same security as your banking information, your social security, and your healthcare, right? So how do you scale trust levels and using a device and orchestration level that says this quantity of data, whatever it might be, needs to be protected at this level. And so I can start using lower level trust nodes that are now can be disseminated much faster, much easier, much cheaper, but they're only allowed to move this sense type of data, or I can only trust them at this level, right? And start parsing out and moving things in levels and environments in which they're meant to be. For us, what we figured out was like we have currently one of the most secure computers in the world. It's used in the DoD, Black Hawk helicopters, special forces, wearables, right? There's no known attack vector on it. It's a complete secure enclave and completely epoxy and silicon encased, which means, again, at a nation state level, everyone knows that if you can get to the memory and chip and microblade everything, you can get everything that is ever ran on that computer. So how do you make sure they can't get to the inside? So that our entire network is secured by these secure enclaves, but what it acts as is a resourcing mechanism to delegate which level of trust and authority of the data can be used at what resources. Now you could start to get all the way down to like bring your own device, right? But that device that's bring your own with a node, software node running on it, we're basically saying, look, we can only guarantee up to this level, right? So we would suggest that you're only running things that you can only trust up to that level. So maybe that device is only getting, 10,000 functions across what would be on the internet as opposed to the 40 million. Like, okay, still serves a purpose, right? And it really becomes an edge device. But that was how we started to look at it, was like, there's not a silver bullet for this. Just like there isn't a silver bullet where you guys started with the chains, right? They all serve a purpose. They're all solving a specific thing. And it's how we start to tie it all together is where you're going to get mass adoption flooding over from Web 2. And until we can bring solutions in Web 3 that actually solve for real world business, we're not going to see the movement. Mm-hmm. It's and a lot of the deep in things out there, as much as I love them, I'm also going like, look, businesses, enterprises, and other things aren't going to trust Billy Bob's laptop to run secure information and value. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen, right? But those devices could serve a certain purpose and function as we look at the entire landscape of the internet and what's used upon it. So anyways, we can move on because you're right. This is the long rabbit hole that could be the whole time. So Dagnum, thanks for having us.
In summary,
but I think it's all relevant and it all sort of ties in together, right? Because you can't have the full package without everything working together. And to kind of pick maybe a little thread about Ben's point about the just allowing anybody to make the hardware. Well, this is where I think you have standards.
Yes.
I have an Android phone and I love it. I think Android in a lot of ways is superior to Apple. But one thing that Apple does do really well is, they control everything. So, it doesn't matter. Like every iPhone is the same. And it's not the way on Android because there is no standard, right? So you can get a Motorola phone that runs Android and it could be completely different operating system, completely different user experience, completely different hardware than let's say like a Samsung or even like a Google phone. But if you had a standard that everybody needed to abide by, maybe that's how you get forward. And I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that NIST actually came out with hardware standards, did they not?
They did.
They have like this
Very
whole
much.
safety rating. So, maybe that could be part of, the whoever is going to join any sort of network. If you want to get on the network, you need to maybe at bare minimum meet the standard bar.
Totally agree.
Or like you said, just if you're just going to bring your own device that doesn't even meet that minimum, safety threshold, well, you can just be in the dugout getting gloves for people, right? That has a value, but you're not going to make it up, to to the plate. The only way that you can make it up to the plate to hit home runs is, you have to have that check mark, right?
And then you allow companies.
Billy Bob and his laptop can be in the dugout.
Then you allow companies, people, and value to make the determination of what they need, right? So again, my other point is this: if we go all the way back to reality, which sometimes Web3 doesn't anchor in, they're pushing so far that they're not in actual reality. Is like, if you're going to move real commerce, first of all, they all have a risk profile that they have. Like, they're protecting commerce, right? They're protecting the value of their corporation or business. There is not an insurance company in the world that is going to underwrite Billy Bob's laptops. Nobody. It's not going to happen. So if the same companies can't move value, even if they wanted to, right? Let's just say internally they're like, yeah, we want to. They're going to get stopped in so many different ways around other mechanisms that they must use corporately that are going to say, no, we're not, you can't do that, because I don't know how to underwrite this. I literally don't know what the risk profile is of these people running this decentralized unsecure, so to speak, or I don't know the security. So how do I put a package together for it? And I think what we ultimately want to do all in Web3 is move value over. Well, in order to move value, you've got to establish trust. And that starts with security, then trust. And if people can trust it, then you have a shot. Now, the last piece there is, I think, where we started this conversation is friction. Are we making it easy again for that same value? Can it be trusted to come over? And then is it easy relatively? And then can I turn around and move value across the different chains? Kyle, I think when you started, and I hadn't got on yet, but I was listening, and you were talking about the individuals that were focused on, let's say, different tech stacks, right? And like, I don't make that choice based off of, I'm never going to use something that's built on, C+. Like, I'm just not going to do that. I think you're right, but I don't think it's a technological stack issue. It's a value transfer issue. People are struggling to go like, how do I move value seamlessly? Like, I may have some opinions on the tech stack, but what I really have an opinion is feeling like I'm locked here. But then the other thing that Web3 has done is created, certain game theory to keep value in their network. So that's an interesting thing, is like, how do you start to get, what's that? How do you start to get value to move seamlessly across these without, I guess what I'm proposing is some of the tribalism, is it happening because they're trying to protect value inside of their network?
Yeah. I mean, you're absolutely right that like the friction that we've created within our industry of moving value outside of your network is a high cost of barrier, like a high barrier cost. And so that absolutely plays to it. And then the other part is just, and this is counterintuitive because this is the foundation of Web3 is that you own your assets, and therefore, you have a financial incentive in the applications you use and the networks you choose to transact on. But I think there's, like you have like Near protocol has got chain abstraction, which they're doing a great job of abstracting away that for the users. On ICP, we have our chain fusion, similar model. But it has to go beyond that, I think. I really do think we need to get to a place where the consumer doesn't even necessarily need to know what network they're transacting on. And that, because I mean, honestly, like there's only going to be 0.1% of the world that's going to care about that kind of stuff. And we've already, we as an industry have already harvested that 0.1%. there's nowhere else to go. No one else is going to care. And so we really have to get to a point where we're not, your selling point isn't that you're built on chain X. Your selling point is that you built an amazing product that happens to leverage some technology on chain X is where we have to get our mindset to.
One of the things I've noticed with companies lately for Web 2, they're getting hacked and breached all the time, right? And so now they're starting to see the need a little bit more for blockchain because it is a bit more secure. The only thing that we've seen as like constant headlines is bridges being an issue and so on. But we're like, because now some of the companies and stuff that I've been working with, they're getting into like metaverse fields for training their employees and all that. And this is like Fortune 30 companies. And they're, really interested in getting their training models and researching programs available for all their employees. And, that's interesting to see like the first wave of these massive industries coming in. And if you've been following Epic Games, Disney invested like 1.6 billion into them, and Thea Interactive is one of Epic Games partners, and they're doing like a whole researching metaverse for like GM or something like that. It's like one of the big automotive facilities, and they're doing all this training models and stuff in their metaverses. They don't care for the most part what tech it's being run on. They just want it to work so that they can teach all these people, the new employees, like how they can research and develop cars much faster, much better, more efficient, and so on. I think, as long as we were mentioning earlier, we're touching on security and making it, more optimal for these companies to come over. It'll be something that within the next couple of years, we'll start to see that new wave of trust go on. It's that first initial, why are we here? Why is it secure? Why does it make sense? And then as they're learning and getting their training wheels off their bicycle, that's where they're going to start seeing, okay, like we can use this for this, we can use this for that. And that's where like the multi-chain approach comes in. And obviously both Constellation and Dfinity have ties to working with governments and seeing their needs be fulfilled. But it's just kind of interesting to see is like now more businesses and corporations are coming in. What are they leveraging it for? And interoperability is also one of the key issues that we need. But it comes from more collaboration from networks, because if they're bumping heads and not working together, we're not going to see it, right? It's collaboration that really makes us stronger as communities and ecosystems. So I think the more willing that we have these networks coming together and doing things, that's where we'll see like the real magic happen.
I love it, Kyle. I'll go back and just to kind of like drive home the point, because this was really eye-opening for me in 2020. Before I got a job in Web3, working for Dfinity, I was working for a small vaccine company called Novavax. They kind of became really famous in 2020 because they were early in having a COVID vaccine due to some work they had done on SARS previously. So it was like a 200-person company, real small company, and we blew up to like 2,000 people overnight because we got $1.6 billion from the U.S. government. I was in the IT department doing data and analytics, and part of that $1.6 billion came with these caveats regarding our cybersecurity within our own internal operations. And I got to see tangentially how much money we spent on trying to secure our network, our intranets, and basically keep control of our IP. And yet publicly, I know it's been revealed, so I can say this, is that we were hacked by hackers in North Korea and also Russia. And internally, I could just say, like, I learned from that experience that you cannot spend enough money to protect your digital assets. Like, there's literally no amount of money you can spend short of maybe, encasing your entire hardware stack in epoxy and having only one person who's allowed to have access to the interface of interacting with, even it's just so hard. If you know about Stuxnet and how the U.S. government infiltrated the Iranian nuclear power plants, that is another great example of just like how it is impossible to secure your networks, and so just this is a huge area that I think blockchain can play a role in. When you think about the fact that crypto is the root word of cryptography, I think at some point we should probably return back to our cryptographical roots. And anyways, there's huge market opportunity there to basically redesign the internet from the ground up, hardware, software, at the protocol level, all of it. And so I really have enjoyed this conversation from that perspective.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I report on just about every single day, because it's literally like who's getting hacked next. I think yesterday it was reported that the airport in Seattle, the international airport in Seattle was hacked and stuff was shut down, and it caused a lot of flight delays. And internet, and blockchain could absolutely help add that additional security layer that these companies are severely lacking in, because I mean it's just a matter of time before some critical infrastructure gets hacked and it wreaks havoc beyond what we've seen. Like imagine if these hackers get into the power grid. I mean, it could be catastrophic.
I mean, you don't even need a hack, honestly, with the weekend. Obviously, the big news being Telegram's CEO getting arrested. And all of a sudden now, I think there's probably a lot of people using Telegram for purposes that they don't want to be made public, who are now like, hey, wait a second, what's going on here? So like that's another great example of how, and we haven't quite solved it in Web3 yet, but basically like you really do need to provide consumers with the full control over the data that they produce and the data that they consume.
So we got about 10 minutes left in the space. And just to sort of stick with the theme of this, collaborative future, just maybe everybody just go down the room and maybe have some forward-looking statements on, what you'd like to achieve or see maybe within the next 12 months. And since Kyle, you're on stage right now, maybe we'll kick it off with you.
We got to clarify which Kyle. So in the next 12 months, what do I hope to see for our industry or for ICP in particular?
Just in general, this, maybe what you would like to see as far as like a multi-chain, collaborative, like super chain initiative. We have DREC, which is great, which is focused on recovery, but just maybe more collaborative efforts, more push for standardization, just so we have this really true open Web3 ecosystem where we remove all the walled gardens, where it's kind of like you described, just freely people can operate, because that's honestly the way that I think, however many years from now, these things are just going to be running in the background and people aren't going to know. And I don't think that most people are going to care that whatever it is running on internet computer or running on Constellation or running on Conduit or running on Algorand. It's just going to be running.
Yeah, I mean, I guess and I'm not an expert on standards, so I can't comment there. I don't know how to get this done. But going back to your question of like, what do I hope for? I mean, really, I hope we get to a place in the next 6 to 12 months where, from a developer or an entrepreneur's perspective, they have an idea for a product that doesn't exist, that can't be built in a Web2 world. And instead of it being on instead of the question being like, okay, let me make a trade-off on tech stack, whichever blockchain you decide to use, or blockchains, you're basically making a trade-off today of tech stack versus current community versus perceived future community, so you're building into like a user base that, you don't want to limit yourself to. But instead, I would rather just see developers who can build out the exact product they want to do by just basically picking and choosing, like, hey, you know what? Constellation Networks does this thing phenomenal, and I need that thing as part of my product. But then this other chain does this other thing that I need as part of my product, and I want to be able to combine these two things to build out what I don't want to make sacrifices on the product I want to build. And I think that's kind of the key to, I don't know, the industry getting beyond the 0.1% that we have now of the world's population and moving on to actual like consumer products or business products that solve problems that exist today.
Conduit and then Ben.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I think the way that Conduit is looking at this is, again, we're starting at the lowest level. So like our vision for this is we're really, if anything, we're like a Web 2.5. We speak to the 2s as well as the 3s. And the 2s, I would say that, Dagnum, you brought up all the different hacks and everything. One of the things we're saying is that you can now turn an on-prem deployment, which used to be a cost center, into a profit center. By doing that, you're taking all of your information back, deploying on-prem, using our mining mechanism for it to become a profit center. But our next vision is, you got a similar conversion of what would be like EC2 S3 buckets, but that's not the further vision would be that you have like a single pane of glass, and think of it like the app stores, except for our apps are things like Constellation and ICP and everything else, where people have one button deployments down to their hardware. And what they're doing is piecing together the stack of what they want in Web3 and the services and offerings, but it's running on secure hardware that they own, that they're getting paid to run, right? I think if we can get to that stage, then what we become is truly a partner to everyone. And our point is like, we don't, first of all, we don't want to build up at those levels because there's incredible builders like you guys, right? We don't need to reinvent the wheel. But how do we create common standards starting at the hardware for that deployment to happen in a secure environment? And then everyone can start figuring out what their decentralized stack should and would be, and it would be very seamless, so to speak, to do so. So our vision is, partnerships in the future and understanding how we create a very easy deployment that people are used to in centralized cloud to deploy whatever they're trying to get to and whatever they're trying to do. Maybe how I would probably answer.
All right, Ben, take us home. 3 minutes.
3 minutes. Oh man, that's no pressure. I've been kind of like sitting on this idea for a while. I love what you guys are saying, right? Like Kyle, you really took the words out of my mouth. It's like, how do we show some sort of meaningful adoption, right? That's not like, oh, I had to figure out this arbitrage opportunity with DeFi, and if I don't get it, then I'm not innovative enough. And I agree with you that there's like these killer solutions that are going to come out in the next couple of years. You can go to Web3 is like an entrepreneur's dream. If you're an entrepreneur, you have the ability to get seed capital, early customer feedback, deployable technology, and an alternative incentive than just revenue, right? i.e. a digital asset. All of these things combined, it kills me that we aren't seeing these like massive exploding opportunities in this space outside of what DeFi has done, that I'm still looking for. And call me, I think some people in our community call us like boomers at this point. It's like, I've been doing this 7 years and I'm a boomer. What the heck? But I think there's this awesome opportunity to like think of anything and have it all in this industry that we've created. Like grant programs need to be more effectively distributed by the ecosystems. We need to come together and say like, okay, what is outside of standards, which standards can be another really yawning conversation, but I do believe that it's like the yawning conversation that you actually need. But I want to see these like massive explosions that Web3 helps catapult new ideas or an expansion of a business, right? And like all the tech is there, but there's still a lot of fear, and there's a lot of confusion. There just needs to be kind of a demystification that it doesn't have to be this kind of crazy science project and who's the most, sophisticated in the multi-syllabic words they use to describe their network and protocol, and actually get into the application layer that can expand new ideas and an entrepreneur's dream. So I completely agree. And I love what you were saying, Conduit, on the side of things with one-click deployment. We're getting ready for our high def conference in Constellation, or Constellation's high def conference in San Francisco. And I've been like playing with like a theme that's going to come out over the next year. And I think it's right in line with that one-click